A proposal in Delaware that would have given free lawyers to tenants to fight evictions and cost landlords thousands in legal fees has failed in committee. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's another good news story for landlords up in the state of Delaware. So I've covered stories before where there have been proposals to provide free lawyers to tenants to help them fight their eviction cases, right? Because their logic is that, well, the landlords, in a lot of cases, they have lawyers in court, but the tenants don't. So therefore, we're going to pay for these tenants to have a lawyer. What they don't explain, though, is that the landlords are paying for these lawyers out of their pocket, right? And this is a civil case, okay? So one person is basically suing another person to get them out of their property. So when you provide a lawyer to one group in a civil party against two individuals, guess what? You're basically helping out one side, and not helping the other. So I'm 100% against that. The way I see it is, if you're going to provide a free lawyer to the tenant, you have to offer a free lawyer to the landlord as well. Okay, otherwise you're just being unfair, especially considering they don't know. They're not saying, hey, we're only providing lawyers to those who are financially capable of, not capable of affording a lawyer. No, they're just saying we're providing free lawyers to all these tenants, right? And there's a lot of landlords who are lower income. There's a lot of landlords who are in the eviction process who are just renting out a spare bedroom in their house, and they have to go through the eviction process to get that tenant out. And if you're a lower income landlord and you can't afford a lawyer, now you're faced with the fact that, hey, I got to fight a tenant who has a high paid lawyer working for them on the government dime. That's completely ridiculous. When those lawyers, they get to the courtroom, you know what they do? They file useless motions and useless, stuff just to extend the process so that the tenant has way, way more time to get out of the property than they need, okay? The grand majority of cases are for non-payment of rent, so there's no fighting them anyway, unless they suddenly come up with the money that they owe and can suddenly pay the rent. And in most cases, that's not going to happen, regardless of whether you have a lawyer or not. Okay, so, it's a waste of taxpayer money to pay for a bunch of lawyers for people who don't have any way to fight their case anyhow, okay? And on top of that, you're being unfair by providing a lawyer for one party and for not another. So, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. What do you think of these municipalities that are passing laws that say, hey, we're going to provide free lawyers to tenants? Okay? What do you think it would be more fair if they also provided a free lawyer for a landlord or reimbursed the landlord for their legal fees as well? I at least think that would be more fair. I still wouldn't like them providing the lawyer for the tenant, but at least that would be more fair. Okay. Now they're not doing that, so that's kind of a pointless argument, but what do you think would make it more fair? Anyway, this article is coming from townsquaredelaware.com, and it says, Tenant Right to Counsel Bill defeated in committee. Yeah, it looks like, the state of Delaware is doing it right. Landlords won for this time, okay? But this might come up again. And if it comes up in a different municipality, these kind of things are coming. This is what they're pushing for. They're pushing for this thing in Kansas City area where I invest. So I have to deal with this as well. But let's get into the article and see what it says. A bill to guarantee tenants the right to legal counsel in eviction proceedings failed in the House Appropriations Committee Thursday. Senate Substitute 1 for Senate Bill 101, which will not advance to the House floor, would have created a right to legal representation for renters facing eviction whose household income is lower than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Placed coordination of the program within the Delaware Attorney General's office, which would contract with appropriate legal service organizations to provide representation in proceedings covered by the bill. Required landlords to provide notice of the right to representation at certain designated intervals of tenancy and in eviction proceedings, and created an eviction diversion program designed to help resolve payment or other issues once a landlord files for eviction. So yeah, it sounds like it was a pretty big program, okay? And usually when a program like this doesn't get through the committee, there's only one reason, okay? It was too expensive, okay? It was going to cost too much, and the benefit was, probably not going to be that great. And that's my problem with a lot of these proposals, okay? How many people will this actually help? Probably not very many at all. This probably won't stop evictions. If it does stop evictions, it won't stop them forever, okay? It'll just be a temporary, well, you might get an extra month or two out of it, but you're going to have to go eventually because you still aren't able to pay that rent, okay? And the landlord wants you out of there. And the landlord should have the right to remove you from the property if you're not paying the rent, okay? It's wrong when I hear that all these places are like, hey, the landlord should let these people stay because, they're going through financial trouble or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you're putting the landlord into financial trouble by not paying the rent. So the best solution for both of us would be if you go, leave the place, find somewhere that you can afford, okay, and then you won't have trouble paying the rent anymore. And for me, I find somebody who can afford my place and they will be paying me rent and I'll be able to pay my bills. So that would be the best scenario overall. The worst scenario overall would be for you to stay here, continuing not to pay debt, the debt that you owe, and me continuing to accumulate and that debt, and then eventually having to sue you to get the money that that you owe me. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm paying a ton of money out of my own pocket trying to keep this place up so that you can live in there for free. That's ridiculous. Okay. And we should never even have to get to that point. But, that's exactly what's happening in so many cases. I mean, I have evicted tenants from my units before, and the only thing I would have just said, no, if you just leave, we don't have to go to court or anything, but they wouldn't do it. Excuse me. Proponents said the bill would have created parity with landlords who are able to be represented in eviction proceedings by non-lawyer advocates or Form 50 agents. Under the bill, legal aid groups such as the Community Legal Aid Society would have been given funding to provide tenants with qualified tenant advocates. Those advocates would not be lawyers, but would be well versed in eviction law and would be able to guide evictees through the process. Yeah, the last thing I want is a whole bunch of tenant advocates, just basically wasting my time and my money. I'm paying a lawyer, thousands of dollars to get this person out of my property. And then I have to go through these ridiculous tenant advocates, fighting for garbage when there's nothing to fight. There's nothing to fight. Person didn't pay the rent, they got to go. That's pretty simple, okay? And of course, we're following the state law. Of course, we're following the eviction laws within the state and the locality where we're operating. But they will file motions and they will try whatever they can to extend it anyway and then screw the landlord over. Okay? But yeah, to me, it sounds like all is really going on. What these nonprofits and these tenant advocate groups are trying to do is they're trying to get some of that government money so that they can get paid. Okay, they want jobs, so they want the government to give them money so that we'll represent them. I get paid $100,000 a year, and I'll go down to court. And like, wait, what are you getting paid $100,000 a year for to go to court to fight for these tenants who have no case? That's ridiculous. Okay, these nonprofits sometimes they're just scamming just like everyone else. Okay. The bill would have created a system wherein the state's 3 legal aid groups could provide qualified tenant advocates to evictees free of charge, or tenant advocates, to evictees free of charge, so long as the tenant falls within 200% of the poverty line. Opponents, including the Delaware Apartment Association, asked committee members not to release the bill. And now they're going to go into the reasons why they were against this, okay? And this is interesting. Landlords don't want to evict their tenants and only evict tenants when they have no other choice, said Deborah Burgos, the association's president. Eviction is a lengthy and expensive process, she said, and landlords incur additional expenses finding new tenants and rehabilitating properties between tenants, not to mention the lost income that occurs after tenants are evicted. The concern is that this bill does not do what they're trying to accomplish by providing affordable housing and keeping people in their homes, Burgos said. By paying for an attorney, we're not really putting the funding that we're providing in the right places. Most cases that show up in the justice of the peace courts are people that cannot pay their rent for whatever reason, and there really is no merit to that. There's not much an attorney can do to maintain that person in their home with the current law. Instead, Burgos said, the state should be investing more in rental assistance, such as DEHAP, the Delaware Housing Assistance Program. Yeah, and she's absolutely right, okay? Instead of actually providing money for something that would help people stay in their homes, such as this housing assistance program, they're just paying a bunch of lawyers and advocates a bunch of money to fight these cases that are not winnable. That's stupid, okay? That's stupid. So what they should be doing with the however much they were planning on spending on these programs is, maybe help with these rental assistance programs so that people can stay in their homes a little bit longer, okay? So yeah, I completely agree with what this person said, right? But the article, I'm not going to read too much more, but here we go. Here's what one of the tenant advocates said while they were pushing for the program, and to me it sounds pretty dumb, but I'm gonna read it anyway, and you can make up your own mind, okay? Daniel Atkins, executive director of the Community Legal Aid Society, said all the bills would have done is level the playing field between landlords and tenants in eviction proceedings. There is an asymmetry in the system, he said, wherein 85% of the time landlords were represented in eviction cases and fewer than 5% of the time tenants were. Contrary to Burgos' testimony, Atkins said landlords' costs could go down due to the bill. They could go down. We are paying too much for the system, he said. We are subsidizing this eviction churn, and that churn is what we're trying to break. Not in a way that breaks landlords. We need the landlords. This is a symbiotic relationship, and we need landlords to provide housing. It is not in our interest to drive them out of business. Well, here's the problem. When you put laws like this in place that force landlords to spend thousands and more dollars on legal fees and keep tenants in their properties who aren't paying for even longer, that's costing the landlord money. Okay? You're an idiot if you think that the costs are going to go down. Okay? And I don't even know what kind of math you do. Well, obviously, you're a tenant advocate, so you don't know math. It's pretty obvious. You don't understand business. You don't know math. You don't understand common sense. And, I'm so glad the state of Delaware is not going to be providing any sort of lawyers for tenants.